Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see everybody in person. Great. Well, thank you. I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite subjects, retention. I've been in gaming for my entire career. I started actually way back to date myself in CD-ROM gaming, and then I built one of the world's first ever online casinos back in the mid-90s. In some form or the other, I've stayed involved in the online gambling space to this day. Along the way, I've been involved in every type of game, from more recently blockchain to mobile to social gaming, social casino. The common thread along this entire period was the focus on retention. That has always paid off very nicely for me and for our businesses. If I could figure out how to use this. There we go. Thank you. So let me start off with a stat that I like to share. Now, this stat is not for the games and gambling industry as a whole. It's just for mobile gaming, right? But you know, it's something that just always leaves me stunned when I hear it. That as an industry last year, we spent $15 billion on acquiring players. Right? By day 30, roughly 90% of those players are gone. Right? I mean, just think about that. We basically wasted $13.5 billion on player acquisition. Why can't we improve the retention on these players? And so, you know, I'm also a small partner in the largest gaming company in India, which recently achieved unicorn status. It's called Games 24/7. Games 24/7 is involved in the real money skill gaming business predominantly. And we have a huge retention team, and I used to talk to the retention team and ask them, why can't we improve our numbers? And the answer was always that, hey, we have tons of ideas, but we're always blocked. And it's hard to get our campaigns live and bring them, you know, to fruition. And that's where I'm going to focus this talk on. But Games 24/7 really achieved this level of success simply because of its focus on retention. We are effectively a data science company that's applying our talents to the games space. Snapyr, which is the solution that Games 24/7 is using that I'll talk a little bit about. We have a booth out here. I hope you come and see what we're doing. We're in public beta now, and amongst our early clients is one of the largest blockchain games in the world, Splinterlands. So let me get into, at Games 24/7, what's our strategy? Now, this is a bird's eye view. To get into details would be more time than we have available right now. But first, everything begins with, where are the opportunities, right? Where are there players who aren't being fully monetized? Are there people in the early life stage who aren't quite converting, people who are active, but we could make them even more active, people who are starting to show signs of churning, and really identifying these cohorts that have what I call unrealized potential. Once we have that, and we have 30 million monthly active players, so once we've identified these different cohorts, then we get into the process of the creative process. Okay, what are the interventions that we can take to get these players to monetize better? And so that is what I call turning potential into kinetic, right? And that comes down to a lot of things. This is just a high level here, but what's the messaging? Someone's stuck at level 3 and they want to get to level 4. Right? And we pick up on that programmatically. How do we push them past? What kind of offers do we need to give them at what time, right? Once we build kind of the campaign for the logic, then we go through our data science team and we look at the data from our past campaigns, of which there are tens of thousands. That data is all cataloged and organized, and we use that data to optimize the current campaigns, to predict our ROI, and then make a go or no-go decision that, are we going to actually run this campaign? Is it worthwhile? Now comes the hard part, right? So great, we figured out what we want to do to cause a change in behavior. Now we actually have to build the campaign, right? And here's where challenge and pain points begin. The marketing team goes to the engineering team and says, hey, this is my spec. The engineering team's always busy. And it takes weeks, if not months, before they can implement these campaigns. Of course, once the app is released and pushed out, guess what? There's a change request, and we're back at square one. So that's where I'm going to talk a little bit more about and what the specific pain point Snapyr is looking to solve. And complicating this fact for the engineering team is these campaigns aren't just simple things, right? They're designed to measure and attribute what was the exact impact of each campaign. That, you know, this campaign produced what kind of change to our retention, what kind of change to our LTV, and we have to avoid all kinds of confounding factors in designing that. Our primary endpoint is always just LTV. Obviously, retention is a huge component of that. So in the early days, you know, all this happened manually. In a given calendar year, we maybe launched best case a dozen, maybe I think in 1 year we'd launched 24 retention campaigns. Now we have anywhere from hundreds to thousands running concurrently at any given time, targeting micro cohorts, right? We've fully automated the whole process of building campaigns, and that process has gone from weeks or months of work to literally sometimes minutes or at the most hours. And it's improved our organizational velocity simply by allowing the marketing team to move independently of the engineering team. So let's get into a little bit of this. I mean, the impact here, you know, it's self-explanatory, but it's been huge. I mean, this is a 9-digit business that you're talking about in terms of revenues that has had a 50% gain in LTV by following this strategy. So now this is not meant to be read in detail, of course, but it's just to give you an idea of an example of an actual campaign that we're running. RummyCircle.com is the flagship product for Games 24/7. And this campaign is what's called a progressive money multiplier. Hey, first day, whatever you win, you'll get some bonus on top of your winnings. Play a second day, you'll get a little bigger bonus, and that goes on for the first 7 days. But it's pretty involved. There's some logic with that. So normally this spec would have gone to the engineering team. Now with Snapyr, this campaign can be built in a few minutes by marketing themselves. This is what it looks like, right? I'll show you an example of this. It's a little hard to show you how this is all put together in slides, so that's why I invite you to come to our booth and see an example of that. But how many of you have heard of Scratch from MIT? Okay, I see a handful of you. You know, it's a programming language that was developed for kids. This is Scratch for marketers, right? It's a very powerful language, but it's built on the same framework. And essentially, you drag and drop the blocks, construct your workflow very fast. You hit run, your campaign is live, you're getting real-time analytics, and you're in business. So this next slide, it shows you just an animation we put together, if you're unable to stop by the booth, what it feels like for one of our marketers to build this type of campaign, right? You can see they're dragging over blocks for A/B testing, to publish different types of content, to different cohorts. They can build audiences right within this. It's a pretty straightforward thing, and there's no programming experience required. So let me just take kind of a little survey here. How many people are mobile game developers in this group? Okay, most of you. And how many of you are actively running engagement campaigns in your mobile games, of those of you who raised your hand? Yeah, so just about, maybe I see about 10 or 15% of the group that raised that. And of that group, what percent of you might run engagement campaigns if it was just a lot easier to do it and you didn't have to go through the engineering process? Just a rough show of hands. I see a handful of more hands. Yep, that's what we see across the board as well. And here's a quote from one of our early clients, Splinterlands. Many of you may have heard of. It's a phenomenally successful blockchain game. Matt is the co-founder of Splinterlands, and this was the biggest win for them, and it allowed them to grow to the level that they are. That the dev team stayed focused on game development, bug fixing. Marketing went off and looked at the entire attrition cycle of players and was able to create interventions or campaigns that impacted each of those life stages. So that's really it. A pretty simple presentation. I wanted to leave some time for Q&A. Any questions? Yeah.
Would you say that this type of campaign approach is suitable for, say, something like VR platform? That it's like that going out and
In all honesty, so for a VR platform, I think the answer is yes, but the reason I'm hesitating a little bit is what are the communication channels to the player, right? So some of my friends, they run a platform called Sandbox VR, if you're familiar with that. So Sandbox VR has your email as a touch point, right? So if you have been a regular customer of theirs and now you haven't shown up for a year, that's a very simple campaign where they can try to re-engage you. But a platform like Snapyr really shows its capabilities on kind of real-time games. Hey, this guy was playing every single day. Now something has changed and he's not, or he's stuck on level 3, or something of that nature, right? It's very real-time in its nature. So I do think the use case for VR is more exploratory at this point versus mobile games and blockchain games where there's a very clear and huge use case. Yep, my pleasure. Cool. Any other questions?
you mentioned in one of your examples about somebody being stuck on level 2.
Yep.
What are the actions that you want to push things to the will in the game as something in reaction, or is it like
Yeah, so there's what it does now and what our roadmap permits. I'll talk about the vision first. Yeah, so the vision is that, yes, you can create all types of actions. You can have messaging actions, communicate with people through push, email, text, Discord, whatever. But also have offer actions. If you're a blockchain game, hey, I want to give this guy an NFT. I haven't seen him. I give him a card as kind of an offer. So I publish an NFT straight into his or her wallet, right? So, and that could also take place in a mobile game where I'm giving you some in-game currency or something like that as an offer. So there's an offers engine component. And then what you talk about is part of, I think, a later term in our roadmap, which is that essentially we call an endpoint in the game and say, hey, this player needs XYZ intervention, but then it's up to the game to actually deliver upon that, whether that's kind of modulating the difficulty of the level downwards, like, hey, the level's too hard and this guy's gonna churn off if you don't simplify it, or sometimes the other way is modulating it upwards. But obviously then that goes outside the scope of the platform. The platform rests on notifying that. Does that answer your question? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? One back. Yeah, actually, if you don't mind repeating that once, that'd be helpful.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. So when it comes to different campaigns being put together, sometimes campaigns require art assets. And would this just tie into some sort of art asset repository or something like that that they can plug and play?
Gotcha. So even right now, which again, come and take a look, but building your creatives within the campaign are all done on platform. So there's a full push notification designer, there's an email designer, SMS designer. As we create more channels, there'll be designers for each of those. But also, if there are external repositories for those, we'll be able to connect and support those external repositories and push from those.